Hi everyone. Welcome and thanks very much for taking the time to join us today for this BI webinar. My name's Steve Bailey and I work as a senior advisor within the Jisc infoNet service based at the University of Northumbria. Jisc infoNet is one of the Jisc advisory services looking principally at helping institutions in terms of organisational effectiveness, achieving value for money, and also excellence in teaching and learning and research. The focus of today's webinar, as you know, is BI, and what I just wanted to do very briefly at the outset here is to give you a quick idea about what to expect during today's session. The purpose is, well, there are two or three main purposes really to today. The first being to celebrate the launch of version 2 of the BI infoKit, which goes live, as I say, today after some substantial reworking from the first version. I'll go into a little bit more detail about the journey that resource has been on a little bit later on during the session. But also to really mark the achievements of the 11 Jisc-funded projects which have very much informed the content and much of the direction and shape of the new resource. So to really have a quick look back at the work of those projects and some of the great things that they've achieved. And also to provide an overview of the growing range of resources that are relevant to this field, and hopefully start a process of discussion and dialogue with the sector about how we might continue to support and develop institutions in this area, because although we are celebrating the launch of version 2 of the infoKit, these things never stand still, and certainly, as you'll be probably more aware than I, BI is a very fast-moving agenda and one that we definitely want to keep tabs on and keep pace with so far as possible. So you can see there on the screen an overview of what the rest of the session holds in store. So very shortly I'll be handing over to Anita Wright at the University of Liverpool, who ran one of the 11 BI projects that I referred to a little bit earlier on, but also looking more broadly at the work that Liverpool have done in the BI area over the last few years. Then there'll be a chance to ask some questions of Anita. It's a bit more of me, I'm afraid, in terms of a quick tour of the revised BI infoKit, not a literal tour, but unpacking some of the themes and issues and things that have shaped the nature of that resource over the last few years and what it may mean about BI in the round within the sector. And then another quick then I'll be handing over to Juan Hay from the Office for University Cooperation in Spain to give an overview of the BI maturity model that's been developed as part of a parallel international BI project. And then be a quick Q&A session for questions for either of us before I hand over to Miles Danson from Jisc to begin to look beyond the current resources and at how Jisc may be able to work with the sector in this area into the future. Now we'll definitely finish by 12:30, possibly early depending on the level of discussion, etc. that the session generates, which I guess brings me neatly on to the subject of participation. I know Andy addressed this in the orientation session. We have, as you can see there, scheduled some time for Q&A at intervals during the program outlined above. And so during these slots, please feel free to raise your virtual hand and we can either give you the mic to ask a question or you can type it into the comments box and we'll do our best to pick those up. But obviously if we do miss them, then do try and draw our attention to them. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Anita, who can start to explain a little bit more about University of Liverpool's experience with BI over the last few years. So over to you, Anita.
Thanks, Steve. Morning, everyone. I'm Anita Wright, Head of Planning at the University of Liverpool. Hope you can all hear me okay. What I wanted to do today is to share with you some of the progress that we've made on MI and BI over the last couple of years. Very much what we're doing is still work in progress. So we are still looking to enhance and develop all the work that we started through our Jisc-funded project and the broader work that we've been doing that Steve referred to. And also we're looking at some new phases of the project now that I'll tell you a little bit later as we go through. But probably worth saying right at the beginning, key to the success of our project has been really treating our project not as a technical or an IT project, but more as an MI journey and a BI journey, and really treating it as a culture and a change program, definitely not an IT project. and hopefully you'll see how that's worked as we go through. So this slide here, I guess, is designed to show what our challenge was a couple of years ago in terms of where we're up to. So we had a number of individual best-of-breed systems, as you'll see at the bottom there, finance systems, HR systems, student systems, etc., that I'm sure you're all familiar with. But what we had is a fairly ad hoc method of reporting from those systems. So sometimes snapshots were taken, sometimes reporting was done directly from the main system, some reporting was done through business objects tools, so it wasn't done in any consistent way. And although our individual systems all had common hierarchies and some interfaces, as you'll see from the diagram there, we did actually not have real clear data definitions or clear business rules, which meant people wasted a lot of their time collecting data and then deciding if it was correct or if it would be appropriately reconciled. Of course, once data is then extracted in one way or another and put into Excel, you do then lose a lot of control over it, and we felt we had a lot of issues with single person dependency, people who've created Excel spreadsheets with formulas, macros, etc., that then only that individual can use and can develop. Also, I guess at this time, some of the work I was doing was looking at people's roles and their role in management information. And anecdotal evidence would suggest people spend about 80% of their time trying to collect the information they need from these different systems. So obviously that then leaves very little time to be able to do the important activities around analysis and informing planning and risks and opportunities for the future. And this aspect really was one of the key drivers for our project in getting the resource and support that we needed. So I'll share with you today some of the different aspects of our journey from doing our original business case to delivery against our project objectives, and now our sort of future plans and what we're thinking of doing next. As we said at the beginning, we did have Jisc funding to support our project, which we were obviously very grateful for. What that allowed us to do is to have a full-time project manager dedicated to this work. I think that was really critical in helping us move things forward in a quicker time frame. Also, the chance to share opportunities and challenges, etc., with other colleagues who also had Jisc projects was really useful. Even if it was just to give us reassurance that we're all facing the same difficulties and challenges. But it was really useful to meet with that group of people and see what others were doing in this area. So just moving on to our project timeline, obviously fairly important to have a project plan in any major project like this. But once we got our project approved and we got our business case approved, we then moved into phase 1 of our project. This was very much about reviewing what we currently had, reviewing our current provision, gathering requirements, and it reinforced, to be honest, that there was a lot of confusion about what was management information to inform planning and performance monitoring, so things like staff-student ratio or applications awards, success rates, that type of thing, versus what's simply operational information, so like a class list, for instance. And there was also generally very little understanding at that time about business intelligence and using MI to make informed decisions about plans and priorities. So as I said at the beginning, we didn't want our project to be seen as an IT project. So we defined our scope in 3 different ways. So we looked at people issues, systems issues, and data-related issues. In terms of people, this is very much about helping people understand their role in relation to management information, how to use MI to make decisions, how to do more analysis and understand the implications of the data rather than just collect the information from different systems. And obviously if people's role is changing, that's about what training do they need and what support can we give to people in the longer term. Data is obviously a critical one. We'll come back to that a little bit later on, but this is about having well-defined data from a single source so that people have confidence in that and they understand what they're looking at. And the system aspect was really the sort of software and the technology, having something that was user-friendly, easily accessible for people who need to use it. Phase 2 was all about selecting our system, going through specification and procurement processes, and we worked very closely with our chosen consultants. So we selected a pilot area, and for us that was all about research management information with one of our schools, a fairly big school of Integrative Institute of Translational Medicine. And we worked on that pilot area until we're happy with the outputs and the dashboards that we got from that. And we then went through a process with our consultants of skills transfer so that we could be self-sufficient internally and get that rolled out across the university. Obviously any project like this has a lifetime, and what we wanted to make sure is that we had something that would keep the developments going for the future and that would carry on doing further work in this area. What we developed was a Management Information Competency Centre. Basically this is a virtual group of users, experts, MI providers, etc. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that because that's been critical to our future developments. Okay, this slide here is really the main objectives for our project and the key things that we were looking to deliver. Hopefully that's fairly self-explanatory, so I won't work through all of those points. But I think the other thing that was important for us at the time that we were doing this work is that the university was going through a restructure. So we were restructuring into 3 main faculties and devolving responsibility and accountability out to those areas. That helped our project greatly because faculty management teams therefore needed MI to support their local planning, and that really supported the work that we were trying to do. This slide here is to show you the solution that we've got to, or at least in part. And it hopefully shows to you that we now have a much more streamlined reporting processes, as well as well-defined and structured data. So obviously key to this is our data warehouse layer in the middle there. And it takes information from each of our individual systems so that we have this single version, one version of the truth. From our data warehouse layer, that we then have a whole series of dashboards and other reporting tools where people can do more detailed analysis. You'll see that I've said it's only a solution in part. That's because the dashboard and the reporting areas are continually developing in terms of expanding the breadth of information we have on there. But also, the next phase of our project is now to work on a planning tool. So this is to help support scenario planning, student number planning, staff FTE planning, etc. And eventually all of our planning related activities will go into that tool so that we can have our income and expenditure model produced in that way. This part of the project will probably start in a lot more detail next year. At the moment we're doing some research around different products, talking to colleagues in other institutions and reviewing our existing processes, because before you start putting some software in this area, it's really important that your planning processes are streamlined. So what we have now is a whole series of dashboards and explorer spaces that are linked to our overall university strategic plan and strategy. All members of staff can access management information against all our strategic priorities. So you'll see our 6 priorities there. And within each of those areas, we have sets of management information. I was hoping to take you into the live dashboards at this point, but I don't think that works terribly well with the technology. So I've got a few screenshots that I can show you, and hopefully that will do the trick just as well. I guess what's important to mention, because you won't see the breadth of all the dashboards, is that we have external data and internal data within them. So for instance, we have NSS type data, we have league table information, as well as our own internal data. And we're hoping over the next couple of months to be able to bring some HISA data in. I'm sure some of you will have heard of the HISA API that allows you to bring data into your data warehouses. So this slide just shows you an example of one of our dashboards. This one's on research applications and awards by number and value, and this is actually a live dashboard, so as soon as people go into it, they've got the bang up-to-date information at the point in time that they're looking at it. All staff can access all dashboards. As I said previously, we wanted to make sure this system was open and transparent. We consulted widely on the format of the and the sort of look and feel of the dashboards, so that users could contribute to that and have something that everyone felt was appropriate. People like the consistency because all the dashboards do look similar, and they very much like the speed with which you can drill down from university information down through to faculty, school, department, and even individual in some cases where that's appropriate. Even though this is a dashboard and obviously therefore format is fairly fixed, users do have options to change the line graphs to bar charts, etc., and show things in the way that they like, and to present things in a way that helps them. Most of our dashboards, this one doesn't, but most of our dashboards also show performance against targets. So targets are taken from people's plans, translated onto the dashboard, and then that can help with planning and performance monitoring purposes, that people can see how they're doing against the targets they've set in their plans. This is an example of one of our analytical spaces that we call Explorer. Basically, this is all the data comes still from the data warehouse, and it allows a more limited set of users. So we have around 120 users across the institution who can access this product. And it allows more slicing and dicing of the data for analytical purposes. So people can look at the detail of the data and extract information on different categories of information that they're interested in. They can do their own calculations in here, and again can present the data in a way that suits their purposes. They can also take this information straight into PowerPoint or into other Word documents. But the critical part here again is that everything is from the data warehouse, so all from a single source, not from an individually created data set in an Excel spreadsheet. I said at the beginning about the Management Information Competency Centre and how important this is for us in terms of keeping our future MI developments going and our move towards business intelligence. I guess the thing that was critical about our MI project right at the beginning was the very close working between the strategic planning department in terms of the business side of things and our computing services department, that's our IT department for the technical aspects, and the need to engage with the wider university. And really it is important that certainly between strategic planning and computing services that we have that shared vision for the project. This group though now meets several times a year. As we said, it's a virtual group, but we do meet formally as well. And this group, either in its entirety or a subset of it, help us with data definitions. They help us set strategy and think about what priorities are for the next phase of development. And you can see from the diagram there that it actually consists of people from within faculties and also within our professional services areas. So it's really important that we maintain that area. This group of people also test out for us any new developments or any new tools and products. So for instance, the planning tool I talked about, these people will be key in helping us select the right product and make sure it meets local requirements. Some of the benefits that we've experienced so far from our project, hopefully we'll see quite a few of these match our objectives right from the beginning. And I think one of the key things for me really is the bit there about focusing on MI to inform planning and prioritisation. So people now see management information as important to their plans and to the work and activity that's going on in schools and departments, and it's not just a set of data. One of the other things that we've also done is provided members of our council with access to some of the dashboards. They obviously don't see everything in terms of the level of detail, but they have their own dashboards relating to our KPIs specifically. So that means they can also go and look at performance when they wish against those key measures, and it means that we don't have to do so many detailed performance reports on a quarterly basis. So certainly having these dashboards and data sets means that we've been able to replace some of those written documents. Automating processes has obviously saved time. We don't need so much manual intervention on some of our financial processes around quarter-end accruals, for instance. And that means we've been able to focus on getting some new data streams available to people that they haven't had before. One of those has been providing information about the performance of principal investigators and co-investigators on projects, not just the PIs. I guess if I was giving advice to anyone who's just starting out on one of these types of projects, it's these success factors that I'd point you to. I think we thought in the beginning, we did use the phrase quick wins, and we thought some of these things would be quick to deliver and we get some information out there quickly. Whilst having the funding for the project had enabled us to do things quicker than we probably would have otherwise, these things, I think you shouldn't underestimate how long these things take. So the data definition side and the specification is really crucial to this work, but it does take quite a long time. It's never right first time. You need to consult with the relevant people. So these things do take longer than we thought they would. Excuse me, getting support from your senior management team is really important as well. If senior managers are not buying into what you're doing, then it really is difficult to move the project forward. And as I said before, the joint approach between the business and the technology is critical. It can't just be seen as an IT project, because you want people to be using the output to inform plans and future risks and opportunities. Because of that, I don't think you should underestimate the impact and the amount of time that it takes to do that institutional change and deal with some of those cultural issues about people having new and different roles to carry out. You need to match carefully your project to your institutional strategy. As I talked before, it's about how you compare to others using external data and how you perform against targets. And linking to your strategy does give your project that profile and help you to prioritize what you're doing. And finally, what is really important is having a plan to keep things going for the future. It's really critical that when your project finishes, that you can carry on the work and it doesn't just end. So for us, that's the Management Information Competency Centre, or the MICC. This approach does work really well for us, but I guess other people might have different approaches and different ways of doing this, but I think it's important that you have that sustainability for your future developments. Thanks very much for listening, and hopefully that was useful, and I'm happy, of course, to take any questions or comments from people.
Great. Thanks very much, Anita, for providing such a concise and informative overview of the project at Liverpool. I hope, and I'm sure, that there will be some questions coming in. It does usually take a little while for them to filter through. I can see we've already got one from Vicky McGarvey at Nottingham Trent asking, how long do you keep the data for, Anita?
At the moment, in our dashboards and data warehouse, we have about 3 years worth of data, but we can put data back as long as we've got it. The reason I sort of say the 3 years is because that's when we did our institutional restructure. So we sort of wanted to use that as our sort of starting point, if you like. But I think a 3 to 5 year trend to be able to make some decisions about performance over a period of time is helpful. But we actually keep data for much longer than that, but we probably wouldn't take it all into the dashboards.
Okay, thanks for that. We've also had a question from Claire from Cranfield University asking what the structure of the project team was, and is, I suspect, or perhaps whether it's the same now as it was at the outset. Yeah.
Okay, we had a full-time project manager who was on a sort of contract period, so not a permanent member of staff, but a contract. I guess I was overall responsible for the project, but working very closely with my colleagues in the IT department. So we had a project board that consisted of myself and colleagues from IT, and one person from each of the faculty, our 3 faculties, and then 2 or 3 of our key professional service areas like finance and HR and the student registry. And we then had from that various user groups. So when we were starting out on our pilot, we had a user group with the school that we'd chosen, and because that was the pilot was on research data, we had a focus on, we had members of staff from our research support office who do the applications and awards type data. And then when we moved on to student data, we had a subgroup of that. The project board then reported into one of our more senior committees to get approval for funding, resources, etc. as we were going along. And we probably did that for a couple of years, and then now what we have is it's actually called business between planning and IT, and is then reports through the normal way and through our normal plans, etc.
That's great. The questions are coming in thick and fast. You obviously really touched a nerve here with the presentation, which is absolutely fantastic. It may well be we can't get through them all, in which case what we will perhaps do is lean on Anita very kindly and see whether she might answer some of them offline, then we can perhaps add that to the FAQ that Andy mentioned at the outset, so it will be available publicly at the end. But we'll work through for the next few minutes. Kate from University of Hull has asked whether you can do any course analytics via this system, because the impression is perhaps it's at a higher level than that, but perhaps you could elaborate.
You can actually go to whatever level of detail you want. So we haven't done course level details at the moment. Our initial focus has been on research data, which goes right down to individual performance. In relation to students, we have all the way down to individual student in there, and you could build that down to course if you want to. That we're not at that stage yet, but there certainly isn't anything in the software or the dashboards that would prevent you doing that, really. It would be, if you wanted to do that, it's certainly capable of doing it.
Great stuff. Rhiannon Birch has asked a question which I suspect is quite a pertinent one in a lot of people's minds, in terms of, have users found the system intuitive, or have you had to offer training on the new system?
Users have actually found the dashboards very intuitive, so they haven't needed any training on that. We've been doing a series of newsletters which we sent out to people, and we've actually done one for our Jisc project. We did a video which talks about how the system works, but also we've done a sort of user video that goes on our website for people to just click onto. But very intuitive, no need for training. In terms of the Explorer analytical space that I talked about, we have provided a bit more training on that for those 120 people that I talked about. I think the system is very intuitive, but it's really helping people understand that they can do some calculations in there, or they can present data in a different way. So some element of training needs for that. And again, we've done a video with a user guide for people to find their own way around it, rather than having to sit in a classroom and be taught it.
Great. Thank you very much. I think we've got time perhaps just a couple more. I know we won't be able to get through them all, but say we will find a way of mopping them up for everyone. Rob Mossop asked, what I suspect is quite a detailed question. I will read it verbatim and then see your response to that. How many KPIs do you present on the dashboard, and how do you deal with the problem of much of the sector data being a representation of a previous year's activity rather than being here and now, which is what a KPI is normally based on?
Okay, I suppose in terms of dashboards aren't just about KPIs, so they're linked to our strategy but are not just on our KPIs. We have all sorts of information on there. So in relation to research, for instance, we've got data on applications, awards, success rates, numbers and values. We've got information on source of funds and how that's split. So obviously not all of those are KPIs, but they are really useful information for people to look at for planning purposes. So if you're looking at source of funds, for instance, and you think you're focused on your research income is far too focused on charity income, say, that might help your planning to how to address getting more research from research councils. So people have found having that information really useful. In terms of our KPIs, we've actually got 12 KPIs, and those are the things that we make available to council. I guess yeah, your issue about here and now versus historic is that we try to make information live so it's very current, but where you want to compare or benchmark, it can be historic. So I think we've tried to present both lots in a different way so people can see bang up to date internal information, but recognizing that it has to be more historic if they're doing a comparison.
Great.
I hope that answered that question.
Thanks, Anita. I'm going to wrap up with combining two questions, because I think they sort of revolve around the same sort of issue, and then that would be the last that we can have, because time's going to defeat us otherwise. One is from Wesley, where it said, was there a big task to cleanse the data at the outset of the project? And sort of a broadly similar question from Christopher Goodland, was your data warehouse set up before you started this project, or was a separate project required to achieve this?
Okay, the data warehouse development was actually part of this project, so we didn't have any data warehouse in place when we started this. So building the data warehouse was part of getting all the dashboards and everything available. There wasn't a massive task to cleanse the data. In actual fact, our data was probably in quite good condition, and I think that's because historically we've had these common hierarchies in all our different systems. So generally, data quality was reasonably good, but what people weren't clear about is what they were asking from the system. So we didn't have those clear definitions of what we meant. So it wasn't a massive task to cleanse data, but it was a massive task to make sure we all understood what do we mean when we talk about research income, what do we mean when we talk about students, what do we talk. So some of our data definitions are actually very specific and quite technical about where the data comes from, and that's why I said that aspect is actually quite time consuming working through that. But I can imagine if your data quality is not good to start off with, that would be an even bigger task to get through that in the beginning.
That's great. Many thanks, Anita, for clearing up those questions. So I know there are a few more, and we'll try and find a way of getting you to address those for everyone after the session. So thanks once again on behalf of everyone to Anita. We're going to move on now to the next session, which is looking specifically at the BI infoKit, which, as I say, is one of the main reasons for gathering all together today, and the launch of version 2, which is happening today. Just before looking to version 2, it would just be useful for us to have an idea about what the level of knowledge and experience of our original BI infoKit is. As you can see, there's on the screen there some grades A through to E, and perhaps if you could just use the voting panel within the participants pane on the left hand side of the screen, just to press the letter which most closely corresponds to your experience, whether you're not aware of it at all, or whether you've read and actively applied it, or somewhere in between. It'd just be useful for us to get a sense in general. I'll just give you a few seconds just to do that, and then we can gather the results of that. I see a few views in the chat pane, which we can add those to it, but there is actually some voting buttons in above that where the names are and where the emoticons are, etc., which you can use as well. Okay, well, I know that. Feel free to keep on adding those just as I have a look at the results. It looks like most of it is kind of within the C area at the moment in terms of read it in brief, which is absolutely fine. It gives us an idea, as I say, of just the rough balance of exposure to it already. So what I'm going to go on to now, we'll collate those results a little bit later on for our own analysis. Thanks, Andy. In fact, he's done that already for us, which is great. So I just wanted to take a moment to look at the background and origins of the infoKit, not least because I think in doing so it's probably possible to determine something of the journey the sector has taken along this path in recent years, as well as giving some context to the resource's current iteration. So above the arrow, what we can see are the various milestones in the development of the kit itself, and then below the arrow, some related activity and resources which have fed into this development, which I think is equally important. And what we see stretching back to 2009 is that we launched a strategy infoKit looking holistically across everything with regards to strategic planning. And one of those 4 sections within that infoKit was what we called at the time environment scanning, not least because BI really wasn't a major buzzword or term that had much traction at that particular time, just back in 2009, but it was kind of, I guess, looking retrospectively, trying to do the same thing, taking as many different perspectives of your institution as possible to inform your strategic planning processes. So looking at internal issues and performance, looking at external factors and drivers, looking at how things are now and beginning to look forward to the future in terms of scenario planning, etc. But as I say, there was no real identity for BI or recognition of it as an agenda in its own right. But that had really changed by 2011 when we started to think about refreshing the strategy kit, and BI very much was on the agenda by then. And so we really changed that environment scanning subsection into a dedicated BI resource, but within this strategy infoKit. So it didn't really exist in its own right purely as part of another resource. That then started to change, and just when Jisc were beginning to pull together the funding and the shape of their program that we've mentioned already and we'll continue to mention, we had the draft BI infoKit, which we got the prospective Jisc projects, those that were interested in the Jisc funding, to review and assess from in terms of its usefulness, its value, etc., which was great. We've got about 20 or so different institutional perspectives, and we're able to take those comments and amend the beta resource before its final launch. The 11 Jisc projects were then able to use the infoKit as a common baseline, measuring maturity, exploring the themes within it. So it was a common thread running through those 11 institutional projects. But then by 2012, we'd separated the BI infoKit as a separate resource. It really required that because it had outgrown its place as a subsection of the strategy kit and was definitely worth a presence in its own right, reflecting its growing maturity within the sector. And at the same time, we also had the opportunity to launch a benchmarking infoKit, which came out of a HISA-funded project looking at the pros and cons and the challenges and the benefits of comparing your own institutional performance with those of other institutions within the sector. Obviously, some very strong links there to the BI agenda. The 11 projects finished their 18 months worth of effort in the summer of 2012, which then gave us a busy autumn as we reviewed their findings and considered how best to incorporate them into this new version of the infoKit that we're talking about today. So Jisc infoNet, as you may know, revamped the entire website for the service in November 2012, and this gave us some new opportunities to present things in slightly different ways, to be a bit more flexible with how we link things together, etc. So we were able to combine the BI resource with others relating to monitoring and measurement within the institutional context. And then finally, in early 2013, we made this beta version of version 2 available. We encouraged people through some of the sector bodies that are interested in this area, USIs, the national planners and so forth, and encouraged their members to comment on the beta version and then to reflect that back within this resource. So I guess from that whistle-stop tour, some of the themes that you can hopefully detect are this continuing emergence as BI as a key strategic agenda in its own right and how we've kind of reflected that within the resource. This notion of constant and constructive engagement with the sector throughout the development of its resource from original inception onwards and hopefully on into the future. And lastly, a broadening of its focus to encompass related areas and recognition of the breadth of its impact, of which we'll perhaps touch on a little bit later on. So just to give you an idea, I'm not intending to go through the kit page by page. Obviously it's there online now, and if you haven't done so already, hopefully this webinar may whet your appetite to go and have a look at it. So instead I just thought I'd take this opportunity to point out a few of the main features of version 2, some of the things that have been changed or improved since version 1. And I think this screen grab of the homepage kind of gives us a hook to illustrate most of these, which I'll go on to explain in just a second. But I should also take this opportunity to publicly acknowledge the work of Stuart Bolton, a consultant with extensive experience in the sector, known to many of you I suspect, and David Price from Cardiff Metropolitan University, Both Stuart and David have been critical in the production of the new infoKit, both in their role acting as critical friends to the Jisc-funded projects, but also playing a key role in synthesizing the outputs and drafting a great deal of the content of the new kit. So a very public hats off and thank you to those two. But I think some of the key things that have emerged through version 2 that we've tried to achieve, building on the feedback we've received, are very much simplifying the structure of the kit, focusing on a fairly straightforward what, why and how kind of approach, which is common to a lot of the infoKits. Focusing more on some of the more introductory material, the executive summary, the kind of the primer sort of side of things, reflecting the fact that we know that we have a full range of experience within the sector at the moment. We've got some projects like Liverpool and others that are a long way down the road of their BI journey, but also we're very aware that there are a lot of others who this is just entering their strategic planning, it's just on their radar, and they're really looking for a lot of entry points into this material, things that they can start their journey on, and hopefully it provides some of that. As you'll see through the navigation pane on the left-hand side of the screen grab there's a real practical focus, which I think is different to version 1, which reflecting when it was derived, there was not that much institutional experience for us to draw upon. That's changed significantly in the last 2 years, and we've been able to draw from the case studies and from the Jisc-funded projects on an awful lot of genuine institutional practice, and to reflect that within the kit, and you can see some of those areas there. We've got the new maturity model, which Juanhe will be talking to us about in just a minute, which is a major addition in terms of the practical usefulness of the kit. And going back to what I was saying about the institutional perspective, we've now got these full institutional case studies, which are summaries of the outputs of the 11 Jisc-funded projects. They're now within our organizational experiences wiki linked to from the infoKit, and also a Flickr collection, which is something it's just really at the outset, and we're hoping is something that will develop from here on in, really. We know that visualization and dashboards is an area of great interest, and also an area that there's a lot of experimentation and interest in. So we're hoping that we can start to produce a resource that can be shared across the sector, where people can upload their examples of dashboards from their systems as a way of actually viewing and sharing some good practice and experience. So in terms of how you might go about using the infoKit if you're new to it or haven't used our resources in the future, I should say, I guess at the outset, that we don't make any claims to completeness within the resource. We don't say this is the only resource you'll ever have to go to for BI. What we're hoping for is that it's a great starting point for those new to the subject, or perhaps those needing a primer on specific aspects of the area presented in some sort of balanced way, but with it links through to more detailed resources where appropriate. I think a lot of its value will come from those that are just beginning to think about or preparing for a project. It contains, for example, some composite case studies. So these were a feature of the first version, and through discussion and research within the sector, we looked at the different ways in which institutions are beginning to think about BI. We know there's not just one route. We know that people are taking lots of different journeys and ways through, be it starting with the data warehouse, looking at implementing a central system, perhaps taking a best-of-breed approach to their line of business applications. And we've derived some pen portraits about how those might develop over time, what some of the challenges may be, and what some of the benefits may be. So if you're beginning to think about future directions of a potential project, there can just be some good primers for what to expect along the way. I think if you are immersed in a project, there's a lot here in terms of issue resolution. The case studies, as I mentioned, have got a wealth of material on how institutions similar to yours have confronted and overcome issues they've encountered. There's 11 projects there, so whether it's using external data, data quality and warehousing issues, interaction with decision making, change management, you're pretty sure to find something on any of those and a lot more in one of the case studies. In terms of monitoring your own performance, we'll be learning from Juanhe soon about the BI maturity model, but it gives you the perfect mechanism for establishing your current level of maturity with regards to BI, and in doing so helps alert you to areas where you may need to focus your effort or can look to build on existing strengths. So something you can really use for your own internal analysis. There's these exemplars and the kind of the showcase element that I've mentioned, the Flickr library, which we hope will continue here on into the future. So something that perhaps you can think, if you are engaged in this area and you've got some successes to show in terms of visualization, then why not send them through, and we can help share those with the rest of the sector. So I guess in summary, although we're marking the launch of version 2 today, the infoKit will continue to be updated as new information and resources appear, and hopefully by bookmarking this resource and returning to it on a regular basis, you can keep abreast of these developments and the latest best practice in the area. So it's not something we think you're probably going to sit down and read cover to cover, as it were, although obviously some people do, but we hope it will provide a lot of entry points into the content, and also gives content at lots of different levels of detail, those that are after a quick, ready reckoner, to those who may wish to drill down to particular areas of detail. I've touched on some of these key themes already. I hope it's become obvious by now, but it is a resource that's very much grounded in sector experience and informed by it, be it through the projects, through the work of the critical friends, or the reviews that we've had of earlier drafts, and we hope this will be something that is maintained into the future. And by all means, do get in touch when you've had a chance to look through with areas for improvement or additional change that you may have in mind. I'm really pleased with the change in emphasis from version 1 to version 2 with regards to from the sort of the theory to the practice, if you like. We want this to be a resource that you can pick up and apply, that answers some questions you or your colleagues may have, and becomes a bit of a trusty guide during any BI initiative that you're part of. The maturity models are a great example of this, tools that you can pick up and just run with straight away, and I very much commend that to you. I think it's probably worth mentioning that we try not to be at all dogmatic about BI. There is no one right approach. There is no Jisc-approved route to achieving BI. It's very much there are common strands or issues, but their relative priority or the route you choose in resolve them is going to vary markedly. So to the final look and feel of your BI solution, and we've tried to reflect that within the infoKit wherever possible. We hope it's accessible. As I said, hopefully there's something for everyone, be it something to wave in front of a senior management audience for that quick executive summary, or something for someone who's just beginning to look at particular issues in more detail. And lastly, that it's something that's holistic. It's not a self-contained subject. There are links to lots of other areas within the institutional gambit, be they strategic planning, learning analytics, etc. And we'll come on to those in just a second, some of which we would try and touch on within the resource. So I'm slightly struggling with my voice here. I had laryngitis all weekend, so I'm glad to be able to talk to you at all, but it's beginning to just play and take its toll just a little bit at the moment. Finally, data visualization is beginning to look to the future. Some of the areas that we think within the infoKit and the Flickr collection and the project case studies, there's a lot of material here on visualization, but we're also aware that we're really only scratching the surface. It's not an issue that's limited just to BI, but to have application in lots of different areas, be they curriculum design or research. And we're actively planning an enhanced resource looking at the new opportunities available in the area of data visualization and some of the challenges it can present and the risks of getting it wrong. In a similar vein, the BI infoKit also touches on the fast-growing area of analytics, of using what is sometimes called the exhaust data created by systems to try and predict and prepare for future events. It's a fascinating area, and one which two of our projects investigated in relation to student retention. We also link to the guidance produced by our colleagues in CETIS as outlined in the diagram, but again we're aware this is a fast-moving agenda, so I'm sure there's lots more we could do in this space. You might also be interested to know there's a webinar this Wednesday afternoon specifically on learning analytics to support assessment and feedback. The URL for the further details and to book are on the screen, so you might want to make a note of those. The webinar will explore a number of different approaches to integrating learning analytics into the context of assessment and feedback design. Excuse me. So I hope that's given you a flavour of what to expect in the new infoKit and some of the practical uses you might be able to put it to. And so now I'd like to hand you over, whilst I grab a glass of water, to Juanje Alcolea Picazo, from the OCU in Madrid to take you through the OCU maturity model and explain its relevance and usefulness in the context of a BI project. It's a project that I've had the pleasure to be slightly involved with, just on the periphery of, and play a small part in, but I know that Juanje's got a lot more to tell you about, in particular with the maturity model, which OCU were very kind in allowing us to integrate within our BI infoKit. So with further ado, I shall hand you over to Juanje.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. Greetings, everyone from Spain. Let me start by quickly introducing the organization I work for. OCU stands for Office for University Cooperation. It was founded in 1994 by 5 Spanish public universities. There's a mistake in the slide. It says 4. It should say 5. These universities were not very happy with what was being offered in the software market in that time in terms of cost and suitability for higher education. So they decided to create a company to provide software products and services specialized in higher education management. The quote at the bottom of the slide is the part of our mission statement that in some way justifies the project that I am presenting today. Okay, about the maturity model. This maturity model is just a part of a bigger project, what we call the White Book project. This book is the last in a series of 3 books around key aspects of higher education management, and it's the first one to be published in English also. It's obvious that BI application to higher education is attracting a lot of attention in the last years. There's an increasing number of universities that are starting to be involved in BI initiatives. But BI is a complex topic with a long history of high failure rates, even in its home environment, which are private companies. And I have to say that taking BI to higher education does not make it any easier. Quite the contrary, I'd say, because of the specifics of higher education institutions. So, the goal of the book is to help universities in developing their institutional intelligence capability. And in my opinion, one of the most interesting and useful results of the book project is precisely the maturity model. Before creating the model, we defined some guidelines about how we wanted it to be. Basically, we wanted a model that was easy to understand, that provided real value, so not being so generic that it becomes trivial, and not too detailed to become overly complex or overly prescriptive. A model that was flexible enough to be able to reflect uneven maturity situations, because we know that maturity is the result of very different aspects that usually do not evolve as a block. On the contrary, they have their own pace, and sometimes that's exactly the problem. Very uneven situations of the different aspects of the BI initiative. And finally, we wanted a model that was strongly based on experience. That's why the core team was composed by 5 people, 3 very experienced BI directors from 3 universities with a very strong BI foundation, 2 from the USA and 1 from Germany. Steve Bailey as a BI higher education expert due to his involvement in the development of this great Jisc BI infoKit. And myself, I have more than 10 years of being involved in several BI projects in different universities as a result of my job. So the starting point was a first draft proposed by OCU, inspired in our own experience and in the maturity model that was proposed by Jisc in their first version of the BI infoKit. It took us about 9 iterations to evolve from the first draft to what we know today as version 1 of the maturity model. Okay, as you can see in this slide, the maturity model classifies institutional intelligence initiatives in 5 possible overall maturity levels with 4 possible characterizations. So the combination of overall maturity levels and characterizations creates a space of 16 possible characterized maturity levels. For example, level 2 initial evolved is a possible characterized overall maturity level result. Both The overall maturity level and the characterization are based on the individual assessment of 9 different dimensions, each one of them evaluating a key aspect of institutional intelligence. Let's review them very quickly. Dimension number 1 values the existence and organization of a team that provides specialized institutional intelligence services. Dimension 2 values the breadth of scope of the institutional intelligence platform in terms of what are the key functional areas that are included. Dimension 3 values what is the role and the level of involvement of functional of source business units in the information supply chain that is created. Dimension 4 values the range and the diversity of the data products that are being offered to final users. Dimension 5 values the level of coverage of all the potential groups of users, the potential universe of users of the institutional intelligence initiative. Dimension 6 values what is the role of the users in the data products lifecycle. Dimension 7 values the effective addressing of what we think are the most relevant aspects of data management. Dimension 8 values what the perceived business value of the data products being offered to final users is. And finally, Dimension 9 values the positioning of the institutional intelligence initiative in the global institutional strategy. Each dimension has its own maturity levels. So to assess each dimension, the user has to read and decide the level that most accurately describes the situation of the BI initiative regarding that specific dimension. For example, in this slide you can see the maturity levels and the descriptions for the business value dimension. Of course, there's inevitably space for interpretation and ambiguity. And this means that perfect matches among reality and what is described in the dimension levels will be rare. And it is, of course, expected and healthy, I'd say, that the decision on the maturity level of some of the dimensions generates some discussions. And it's also a good practice to explicitly write down the agreed justification for the selected level of each of the assessed dimensions. Okay, this screenshot shows the final result of an assessment using the Excel tool provided with the model. And here we can see all its components. The table at the top shows the characterized overall maturity level, which is level 2 initial and valence, and a brief description on what those specific results mean. And the table below shows the specific configuration of dimension maturity levels that yield the previous result. So as you can see, it's not only important the final characterized overall maturity level obtained, but also your specific configuration of dimension maturity levels that yield that result. Since there are literally hundreds of possible configurations representing very, very different situations. The model should be easy enough to be applied in a self-assessment. Of course, the ideal person for conducting that assessment is the person in charge of BI, or if that role doesn't exist yet, at least a person with some BI basic knowledge, since it's necessary to understand some BI concept to properly use the model. In general, maturity models basically help organizations in 2 ways. The first one is that they force organizations to take into account aspects that may be initially very elusive, but are very important. And second, they help in defining strategies and roadmaps to improve through the usual cycle, assessing the current situation, identifying areas of improvement, learning from those that excel in those areas, and taking action. Now, 3 real case examples that are featured in the white book. This is the result of the self-assessment for the University of Arizona, which has a level 4 consolidated and balanced result. This one is from the University of Osnabrück from Germany, which has also a level 4 consolidated and balanced. Now, this is from the University of Illinois, and already with a level 4 consolidated and balanced. And now some very quick conclusions about these 3 results. First, as you have seen, the same final result has been achieved from very different detailed situations, as I explained before. It's also interesting that data management is consistently the less mature dimension, So there's a probable systematic deficiency there. Also, Osnabrück University is the only case that obtains a level 5 universal in the user coverage dimension. So it would be very interesting for the rest of the universities to see how Osnabrück has achieved this universal user coverage, what kind of data products they are offering to user groups that are not being addressed by the other universities. And finally, I just want to stress that this is version 1 of the model, and by no means we consider this to be perfect. So feedback in the form of questions, suggestions, or any kind of collaboration is of course very welcome. Also, more information about the Whitebook project and some interesting initiatives based on the use of this maturity model will be presented in the next UNIS Congress in about a month. And that's all. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
That was a really good overview of what I personally know has been a really exciting project that has delivered some great results. If any questions for either Juanjo about the maturity model or about any of the other areas of the infoKit development, then by all means let us know, and then we can, now's a chance to raise those. Whilst people are perhaps thinking of any questions, now would be a good opportunity to plug when the white book will be available, Juanjo, if you'd like to, particularly for the UK audience, because I know there's going to be multiple language versions available.
Mm-hmm. It should be out in September in English version. It should be available for free to download as an electronic book.
Excellent, great. Well, we look forward to seeing that in due course. If there are no other immediate questions, then I will say thanks very much to Juanjo for those. You've got his contact details there on the screen if you do think of anything else in the meantime. And I will pass over to Miles Danson, who many of you will know as a program manager within Jisc, to really lead us into the final session of today's webinar, looking at some of the broader Jisc resources that are of interest within the BI agenda, and perhaps equally importantly, perhaps more so, thinking about what some of the next steps might be in terms of how Jisc can support BI on into the future. So without further ado, I shall hand over to Miles.
Thanks very much, Steve, and thanks also to Anita and Juanjo for their excellent talks. So to introduce myself, folks, I'm a program manager in Jisc, so I've been looking after this business intelligence piece for must be a couple of 3 years now. I've been working with Steve closely and with aforementioned 11 projects. So I'm conscious we've not really mentioned those projects, so I'll give you a quick whiz through. They were University of East London. I know Gary's on the webinar at the moment, Gary Tyndall. More about Gary in my little presentation. UCLan and Liverpool. We heard from Anita, I hope she's still on here. And those three looked across most of the business areas for business intelligence, so in that sense they were the broadest 3 projects. Someone earlier was asking about student analytics, I think, and 3 projects that were looking into student-related business intelligence and some analytics capability were at the OU, Bedfordshire and Sheffield to a lesser extent. Sheffield was more about visualizations. The OU looked at VLE type electronic system interactions and student data exhaust, if you will, and predictions around those to support retention and progression. Bedfordshire looked at different indicators. I think they started looking at VLE, but then they were more drawn towards the physical aspects of student interactions with the institution, so library and lecture attendance and those sorts of indicators. Manchester looked at estates, intelligence for estate services. Huddersfield and Glasgow were the 2 that looked into research. Although, as Anita alluded to earlier, Liverpool had a research focus as well. Bolton looked at staff-related information, and I've got a slide to look into Bolton a bit further. Some interesting stuff there with regards to staff workload model. And the last one was at Durham, and they were unique in that they worked with HESA on benchmarking business intelligence applications. So, What I'm now going to do is run through some next steps, but before we get to those next steps, I thought it might be helpful to have a quick look at some of the benefits. So I don't know about you folks, but in my organisation in Jisc, my chief executive is asking tight questions about benefits. So we're looking for efficiencies, we're looking for all those sorts of things. So I've flagged up a slide here for you. These are benefits as reported by those 11 Jisc projects in April 13, so just last month. The project's finished in August, so in that sense this is 6 months since the funded period had finished, and across those 11 we got examples from them on each of these categories. So hopefully you'd like to see those sorts of benefits yourself at your own institution. So the question that I'm going to try and address later is what more can Jisc do to help you folks to achieve these sorts of benefits through business intelligence and analytics? And I'm going to open that up to the floor shortly. So those are the sorts of benefits. Quite impressive range of benefits, I thought. So I alluded to Bolton, and here's a little slide. You can just see in the background there a screenshot of a workload allocation tool. So it's a visualization. Now Steve walked you a little bit through the infoKit. If you were to open that infoKit link, you'll see the Flickr stream, and the Flickr stream's got images in there of these sorts of dashboards. So if you want to see what Bolton have done, there are examples in there in the infoKit Flickr stream. The Bolton one was this workload allocation tool, and it looks across the institution, and it's focused mostly on academics, and it's looking at things like teaching hours and research hours and all that sort of stuff, and productivity. So in that sense, could have been quite controversial. It was very helpful for Bolton in that it helped steer them very much through a restructure that they were doing in 2012, and you can see Hilary alludes to that in her second that quote that I've whipped in for you. In terms of the benefits, Hilary flagged a lot of them, but obviously, as you'd expect, decision making, strategic planning, risk management and efficiency gains were all in there. And I think also clarity was very helpful, so that people could see across the board very quickly who's doing what, to what extent, where there's spare capacity. And Hilary also mentioned that it helps strategic managers to really evaluate in a better manner when requests for extra resource allocations were put to them. They could then see where the justification was coming from. So that's the Bolton one I wanted to show you. Now this one, I saw Gary was popped up as a participant for us today, Gary Tyndall from University of East London. Again, as with the previous slide, in the background you can see some of the dashboards that Gary and the team put together at University of East London, and they're in that visualizations aspect of the infoKit, so on that Flickr stream. They're great dashboards, some fantastic dashboards. We had these at the Oficina de Cooperacion Information Systems group in October last year, and there was much interest. So Jisc are chatting to UAL about how we might make this sort of thing a little more available to more widely across the sector. There's a lot in here about benchmarking, so Gary and the team are able to benchmark UAL against their competition. So in that sense, it informs strategic planning, resource allocation. They've got efficiency gains, effectiveness, competitive advantage was in there, risk management's improved. And you can see in the right-hand bubble, there was a significant, I think it was quite a significant funding opportunity that this opened, where Gary was able to work more with local government across the London boroughs. It was a cracking project out of UEL. Now next up, I wanted to share with you a few related areas. So I've been looking into business intelligence and analytics particularly for about a year. Now rather than write up notes from events that I attend and events that I run, what I try to do is live blog things. So there's some of the bullets you can see here are links to my live blogs. Now in the chat box, I'm hoping that Andy Stewart will be able to post in some of these for us. So maybe Andy, if you could give us that link on the Jisc Analytics series into the chat box. There we are. So if you want to open that one up, I've given them bit.lys so they're vaguely memorable. So Steve just kind of tripped over this analytics series. Now, Jisc funded this through Jisc, and what you can see here is it's my blog post that's introducing the series. So it started coming out in December 2012, and the last paper came out in March 13, so they're bang up to date. They're across those. You can see the big issues, so analytics for the whole institution, balancing strategy and tactics, analytics for learning and teaching, analytics for understanding research, legal, risk and ethical aspects of analytics, and then there's a bit on the history and the context, and a bit on tools and technology and infrastructure. The practice ones there, implications for analytics in teaching practice in higher education. That's very much case study type material, and institutional readiness. And then the overview paper, which is titled Analytics, What's Changing and Why Does It Matter? So rather than delve straight into the series, you might find that little blog post a helpful introduction to set the scene for you. It's on the Jisc Observatory, and the link is in there to take you straight to it. The other ones on here that I flagged for you are events that I've attended recently. So the dashboarding for peak performance one. Andy, do you want to just paste that one into the chat box for me, please? Thanks. So this one was very recent, February 13, and it was in Nottingham, as I recall, and it was specifically around. I love the verb dashboarding. So I think someone at the event mentioned it sounded like some form of some sort of illegal torture, dashboarding versus waterboarding. So much hilarity around that. But as you can see, there's a blog post on that, and it whips you through everything that went on, along with some resources at the end to some of the big names and big thinkers in analytics, specifically for sorry, not analytics, on visualizations for higher education. If you're interested in learning analytics, the next link there is Solar Flare. Now, Solar are Society for Online Learning Analytics Research. They comprise pretty much UK, some European, and they're quite American based as well. EduCores are quite interested in Solar, I've noticed, as have Jisc been. And they run the LAC conferences, and there are two bullets on those to the right. That's Learning Analytics and Knowledge conferences. One was in Vancouver, which I was lucky to attend last year. The most recent one, that LAC 2013, was in Leuven in Belgium. And what you'll find there are my my jottings and ramblings around what was going on in learning analytics, both in Vancouver and in Leuven. I was looking for benefits, evidence of benefits, and I found some. Carnegie Mellon had a very interesting talk up there on analytics, where they'd come up with some specific measurements so that they were able somehow to deduce that they'd got, I think it was 90 hours or thereabouts of teaching related activities, and they thought these were great, and they thought they were well thought out, pedagogically sound. So 90 hours, and when they somehow managed to measure the achievement in learning, the improvement in learning was in the region of about 3.7%. Don't question me about how they came up with those figures, but they were quite startling. And through the analytics, so identifying actionable insights, I guess, is the way I think of analytics. And then, of course, moving them to action. So the analytics identified problems where there were some quite significant curriculum activities that were wasting students' time and wasting staff time in trying to deliver these things because they just weren't effective. So they were able to target those and change things around. And they hacked it back from, I think it was 90 hours down to about 40 or 50 hours, and they managed to gain 19% of improved learning. So that's just to give you a bit of a flavour about learning analytics and the sort of things that you can do with it beyond simply identifying students who are on a path of at risk and taking action on those. So I hope those are interesting. There's a few of those. I just carry on live blogging these events. There is a Jisc event. I'm looking at running a co-badging an event with Solar. So it would be a Jisc Solar OU event in July. and what I'd like to do is let you all know about that once I've firmed it up. So I've not actually gained an agreement to do it, but it looks highly likely, and that'll be a UK-based learning analytics event. The idea being it would bring together the researchers with the sorts of folks who I hope are on this webinar, people who can change HE practice, and then bring those folks together and let's have a look and see what we can do together. So there's a few links from me. Now this next slide, this is the Jisc Relationship Management Program. So this is an example really to you to show that the analytics cuts across different business areas. So this project at Derby University set out to look at improving the relationship between students and the institution, and what they actually fell into was this notion of student engagement analytics. So what you can see here is the graphic is known as the Derby dartboard, and within there you can see primary, secondary and tertiary indicators of student engagement with the institution. So Derby used that data to predict failure and target resources appropriately. Now they came up with the concept of positive withdrawal, which I found to be quite novel myself. This idea that in some cases failure is actually the best option for a particular student. There might be very good reasons why they need to withdraw, and so Derby were identifying those students and then creating a positive withdrawal experience which they felt would lead to repeat business. So a little bit left field, that one for you. Derby's not actually in the BI infoKit. Okay, so right, so Andy, if you could help me out with this one. What I'd like to do, folks, is a repeat. Oh, okay, Andy's just popped up the relationship management link. Thanks for that, Andy. That's the relationship management infoKit that's gone into the text box. Now, Andy, if you could help us out with this straw poll. So what I'd like to ask folks still on the webinar here would be, from the work that you've heard so far, Steve and I have come up with 5 different slants of the BI agenda that we think are of relevance. So my question to you folks is, through that voting panel in the participants box, we'd like to hear from you whether you'd agree with these. So the vote, here's the question for you: what are your institutional priorities with respect to business intelligence? So what are your institutional priorities with respect to BI? A, B, C, D, or E? Or if it's something else, please type it into the chat box and we'll capture those and use them in future. So we'll give it 30 seconds for people to do their voting. And do please pop extras into the chat box if there's something that we've missed.
Miles, in the meantime.
And Bailey at Harriet Watts saying all of the above. Thanks, Em. Okay.
In the meantime,
okay, so we get in.
A question.
I mean, it's kind of a lead on A and B, isn't it? But a good spread on C and D, and benchmarking is not of so much interest at all. Interesting.
Hi, Miles. Can you hear me?
Okay, Andy, if you can close that poll. Thanks very much for that, folks. I don't know whether Andy's able to produce the graph so quickly. There we are. Ever efficient. Thanks, Andy. Comment in there from Russell saying that A was the priority, and oh, Claire, hi Claire at Derby, would also agree that it's all of the above. Ruth's asking me, have we got a link for the Derby University student engagement work? Well, we can certainly circulate something around, or Andy Stewart might be able to pop something in directly from the research relationship management infoKit, Ruth, but we'll see if we can come across that. So we're coming into the last few minutes really of the webinar, and Steve and I wondered whether we might try to have some sort of discussion through the text box. It'll have to be, I think. And the subject for this is how might Jisc best help the sector advance its BI capability. So thinking of yourselves, what is it, what things might Jisc do over the next, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, let's say Q3 into Q4. What things could we do? We've got the infoKit, we've got all that rich sort of material there. But I'm very conscious that an infoKit's a great thing, and it sits there, and we've done this one webinar, but there must be other aspects, other interventions we could do for you that would help you on. So what are the things that would really help you out? So if folks could have a bit of a think about that and start to type into the text box, I'd be very grateful. Steve, did you want to jump in? Is there anything you wanted to say about this idea of a discussion?
No, I think you've covered the basis of that at the moment. We'll give people a chance just to reflect on it in a minute. I know there was a question a little bit earlier on when you were talking, Miles, in the text box, which you may not have seen. It was from M. Bailey at Heriot Watt, asking whether the Jisc Solar/OU Learner Analytics session that you suggested might be in the offing, is that going to be based in Milton Keynes, or any other details on where?
Yeah, sorry, I missed that question. It's most likely that one would be in Edinburgh, so something for a change a bit north of the border. It's not out of the question that if there's significant demand for that type of intervention, we might look at that as being a regional. So I don't know whether people want to type this sort of thing into the text box, but would you find regional face-to-face events with leading lights in business intelligence and analytics and folks like yourselves coming together? So I think the quick answer is the July event is likely to be Edinburgh. We could run something further south. We could run something Midlands. Maybe, you know, we could do something in Wales. I know Lucy Hodgson popped up on the text chat earlier. I know Lucy's involved in the UK National Planners Group, and she came in the two tacks. One was, would we like to do something through national planners? And you know, that's a question to you folks. Would you find it helpful if Jisc worked through professional associations to reach the right people at your institution? Would that be a better way of doing it rather than branding it specifically Jisc? Now, Lucy, she was saying, yes, please, national planners are very keen to co-brand, co-badge and co-organise something, but we'd be keen to hear from you. What is that something? What would it be? Lucy also alluded to an on-site request, so would that be of help to you? Lucy's at Aberystwyth, and she was asking me specifically, would I make the journey down to Aberystwyth to help them with the infoKit and begin to take their first steps? So would on-site consultancy, is that the sort of thing that folks might find of interest?
Just looking.
Okay, well, we've got a few ideas coming in. Regional would be good. Happy to host. Thanks, Rob. Content from Val. Yeah. John says so. This regional seems to be resonating with people, and by regional, we're obviously saying it's going to be a face-to-face type event. So I find that interesting that people, I guess what you're saying is you're willing to come off-site, spend a little bit of budget for TNS to come somewhere, and then dedicate a day to an event, as long as we can get the content right. So that's helpful. Ask you all a question then. What about digital? So face-to-face stuff, yes, we can have a look at that, and if there's demand for it, we'll certainly do something. But is there anything digital in particular that you like? This type of webinar, is this the sort of thing that's useful? Would you like more webinars on more specific topics? And I'll just stop speaking and let people fire into the chat box.
I think it's obviously picked up as well that there's a great demand there for regional events, and I'm guessing.
Claire at Cranfield wants more webinars, exchange of experiences, and more Jisc funding. Excellent. Now I've got a question for you all. I'm thinking about the who's. Who are the people who we all feel here would be benefiting from this? What sort of staff roles do you think we should be targeting? That would probably help Steve and I if we were to press on and do anything with particular professional associations. Yeah, thanks for that, Andy. Will do. So, okay, in fact, I'll take Andy Stewart's cue on that, and I'll leave you with that thought about who and what sort of staff roles that we might engage, and I'll switch the mic off and let Steve come in.
Thanks, Miles. So I didn't take it personally. All I was really going to say was that obviously, as you already alluded to, there's a lot of interest, it appears, in regional meetings, and I'm guessing from the kind of the tone of comments that this is an interest less in organising regional conferences where people are spoken to, if you like, and more on the kind of the participative sharing of experiences idea. one of the big features of the BI program that's really helped, I think, that was we clustered the projects within 3 or 4 cluster groups, and then the idea of those groups to try and gather some sort of sense of community and shared experience within that program framework, but in a more closer grouping and coupling, if you like. And with a little bit of pump priming money on top of the program funding, we were able to just facilitate some shared experience workshops using active learning and some other approaches. Facilitation was provided on the day, and I just wonder whether that's more the kind of thing that people would appreciate at this time. Perhaps some featured speakers, as I think you mentioned, Miles, but really it's a kind of a gathering together to share experiences that seems to be coming through as one of the main reasons for getting people together.
Okay, I'll take the mic back. Thanks for that, Steve. Okay, so that's really helpful, getting all that feedback, and we'll get all that written up, and then Steve and I and colleagues back at Jisc will start to come up with some ideas about what sorts of things we could do in the future. Right, shared data, that's interesting. I wonder, is there any demand out there for resources on getting started? Do we need to, is there still that basics demand? Is it getting started where we need to be targeting, or are people feeling that really, as Juan A was with his examples, people there were sort of 3s and 4s already on his maturity curve. I wonder if you got a feeling for where you are on your maturity curve. Okay, Chris is saying, yeah, getting started is very welcome. Okay. So it seems like we've got still got a range out there in terms of maturity. Good. Okay. Right. Well, I'm conscious that we're into the last 3 minutes, Steve. So I'm just going to do my last couple of points, and then I'll hand back to you to close. Jisc and Jisc-funded, the folks who worked with us on the analytics series, they've put together a little questionnaire, and with your permission, if you don't want us to get in touch about this, let us know. And what I'd like to do is just push that around the attendees of the webinar and see whether see where the sector is really in terms of analytics. And what we'll do is CGIS will write that up as a brief paper, and they'll share the results at conferences and events, but we'll also get those back to you. So if you fill the analytics questionnaire in, I guarantee you'll get a response from that with the analysis probably by September, if not before. And the July event on learning analytics, I'll get back in touch with you about that as well. I'm conscious that there are a whole pile of questions in here that I've not been able to answer, so as Steve said earlier, we will do our best to get back to you all offline on that. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic back to Steve to conclude, having thanked all our presenters from me and for everyone who's contributed to the text box. So over to you, Steve.
Great. Thanks, Miles, and thanks for steering us in bang on time. I hope you have all found this useful. I know we've covered a lot of ground, both from the institutional perspective and also in terms of what Jisc and others are doing in this space. And it's very clear from the interaction with you from the chat box that there is still a great appetite for further work in this area, and you've given us some great material to think through and to perhaps plan some next steps for us without being able to promise anything at this particular stage. As Miles alluded to, we will try and get back to you with regards to all of the questions and the comments that are coming through the chat box that we haven't been able to address directly through the session. And we will certainly be putting the link to the outputs from today's webinar on the BI infoKit, so do go to that resource and have a look at it over the next day or two, hopefully by the end of the week, I would suggest. So it only leaves me to say thank you again to Anita, to Juanhe, and to Miles for all your contributions today, and to my colleague Andy Stewart for steering us and seeing to all our issues and problems along the way. And thanks for you too for all your contributions and for your attention. And I look forward to joining you on the next webinar. So thanks very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks. Bye.